Morning session of day 5 of tranche 2, phase 2 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry. Today is all hearing the evidence of HN122, who was an undercover police officer who was deployed between 1989 and 1993 into the Revolutionary Communist Party, the publishers of Living Marxism magazine, to differentiate them from the other RCPs, and Class War. I'm joined with Phil, who was a member of Class War at the time and remembers HN22. I think a lot of the evidence this morning has been typified by people calling it dull, boring, and somewhat grey. He's been. We just had a little chuckle there from Sir John Mitching as he walked past, as I was just calling the witness boring. I fancy he might agree with us. It has been fairly dry, a lot of it. What are your thoughts on it?
It's very cagey. Yeah. Oh yeah. He was extremely cagey. Yeah. Measured in what he said, and yeah, he was definitely thinking about everything every reply, and not giving any hostages to fortune there, so to speak. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we got from his interview was that he was being taken back to his Operation Hearn interview, which was an informal interview, which you get the impression most of the undercover officers were never expecting to hear any details from again. Certainly they weren't recorded, they were just handwritten notes that were taken, and this were the only real areas where he was ever slipping up. You know, he admitted in that there had been discussions between undercover officers about the use of sexual relationships, something which many of the other officers said never happened. He then later on he was said, oh well, when you were discussing it, you said, oh, we didn't discuss it, but you said you did, and you could see that he was, oh shit, I've messed up there. He's like playing that yes/no game in a desperate attempt not to be caught out with anything. Was there anything that he talked about there from events that you remember? We've only really got through his sort of RCP deployment so far, which was obviously a very different group to Class War. But are there any thoughts about that?
Well, that's completely outside my experience. Yeah, sure. It's like the RCP compared to Class War is like the difference between night and day. Yeah. I mean, my main observation would be compared to the RCP, you know, Class War as an anarchist group with completely different politics would have taken him as face value and not gone away and checked him. It wasn't something we routinely done. If he come to us and said he was Neil Richardson, that's, well, he's Neil Richardson. Yeah. Okay, maybe see that as a weakness of Class War, but I think it does reflect the fundamentally different politics of the two groups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the RCP had like a security vetting procedure. They would visit the home of the person, so like he ended up like hanging around in his cover flat for like weeks on end, like waiting for a knock on the door from the RCP. Which I mean, it's kind of put to him, look, but don't think you're wasting your time and kind of misusing your overtime funds for this. And he was like, well, I had to. I mean, you can just imagine him there, sat there, kind of watching telly, listening to radio, you know, not doing very much.
Yeah, and it's how ironic it is that this is the group that now has members in the House of Lords. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like Claire Fox ended up as a Brexit Party member, and then ended up in the House of Lords. Now a Reform MP.
Boris Johnson, no less. Yeah.
Yeah. Put that by Boris Johnson. I mean, like in terms of the ignominy of the way in which some left-wing parties have like sullied their legacy, you won't get worse of a legacy than the RCP. Let's be fair. So, I mean, when we were a member of Class War when he joined. Do you remember him appearing?
I was a member. You know, was at a meeting, the first meeting he ever come to, which was a anti-election alliance meeting, and yeah, that's where he introduced himself to us. Yeah.
Did he say that he had been a member of the RCP?
Yes, he did, actually. Funny enough, where I lived on Hackney, I lived on Greenwood Road in Hackney, just off of Dalston Lane, and I can remember once he'd said the RCP house was on the same road, like literally about 100 yards from where I lived, and I can remember him. It only ever occurred to me when we were sitting in there that he told me that so many years ago. Yeah.
I mean, did you find it weird that he'd gone from the RCP to join Class War?
Yes, we did, but you know, he's relatively young at the time, so people look around to see what they're comfortable with, don't they? And, you know, maybe if you're the sort of person who may be not comfortable with something like the RCP, might be more at home with the Class War, maybe just looking around, you know, people change, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you say, you were doing the anti-election alliance. It was the year before had been the first summer of discontent. So a pretty active group at that time, right?
It was then, yeah. It was very active at that time, yeah.
And what sort of stuff did you get involved with?
Well, Neil or myself.
Neil, yeah.
I don't remember really. distributing the paper, selling the paper on the street, writing for the paper. Maybe it's such a long time ago. I can't remember specifically what he did. Yeah.
No, I mean, his witness statement's now been published on the website. All the documents relating to his evidence have been published. So he hasn't got to it yet, but I mean, I've read the witness statement. I mean, within it, I mean, he was a member during the time when the Class War Federation split, the Class War organisation. Do you remember details of that and his involvement?
Yes, he was very involved in that. That was quite weird, actually, because Ian Bone, that is, he'd been not really involved in Class War for several years, 7, 8, 9 years. He was in Bristol, and he'd come back to London at that time, and he got re-involved in Class War. Literally took about 3 weeks before the group had split, and what happened, the split come out of nowhere. It's not like there was all these discussions going on, right, and then suddenly they decided to go their way. It just come out of nowhere. Like, literally no one talked to me. There was no discussions with me prior to that happening. I just got a phone call one day to say Ian split the group. They started a new group, yeah, and he went off with them. Yeah. So what his involvement with that was, I had no idea. But yeah, he decided to leave Class War Federation and go off with the Class War organisation, which was Ian Bone and Tim Scargill, plus maybe a couple of dozen other people. Yeah.
I was a member of Class War many years later, so I wasn't around for any of it. I seem to remember talk of it being kind of just, the Class War had lost its way. It was much more about having a go.
Yeah, that's very... Actually, numerically, it was bigger at that point than it had never been, but it was doing it slowly. It wasn't the Ian Bone approach of just blow the whole thing up, yeah? But it was really bad news, because it was like holding everyone else in Class War in utter contempt, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is something which, we saw with other undercover officers who've been involved with groups that then go on to split not long after. We've seen it right from the beginning with Sandra, the undercover officer who infiltrated the Women's Liberation Front, and they resulted in this terrible acrimonious split within the organisation. Certainly, in my own experience, Marco Jacobs, who infiltrated South Wales anarchists, though we didn't officially split in any way, there was big divisions within the group which were exacerbated by his penchant for gossip and scandal. I mean, did you witness anything of that coming from HN122?
No, he was relatively quiet and reserved, really. He wasn't exuberant, he wasn't mouthy, he didn't get involved in the arguments, but I think behind the scenes probably was the person whispering in people's ears,
Yeah, I mean, this is often the way. I mean, because obviously they're skilled in this sort of thing. This is kind of why they're chosen for the roles. It's often was their sort of their approach not to be the person, the instigator, but to be whispering in the ears of the instigators.
Yeah, yes. It's funny, he was talking about the bill stickering. They talked about that quite a bit, didn't they? And it's I don't know if you may not. I lived in Hackney at that time, but they used to have these kind of bill stickering wars between the SWP and the RCP, where SWP go one night and cover all of Hackney in posters, and the next night they go out and put RCP posters over all of them. So he probably had a lot of opportunity to do that, but Class War was far more. Didn't do that to anything like the extent they did. They were almost obsessed with it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember younger viewers might be kind of confused as to the importance that was placed on putting up posters in public places. But yeah, I mean, there was an obsession really, particularly for left-wing political parties, to get as many posters up as possible and counting them and kind of referencing how many they had towards the others, and covering each other's up, which is just a really kind of weird form of sectarian activity in today's eyes. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, so I mean, you were. So when the split happened, he went off with the other factions that you were involved with. Did you see much of him after that?
No, I didn't, because funny enough, he called me one night after this. It didn't last long, the Class War organisation. It was gone within, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months. It had disappeared completely. But I can't remember exactly why, but he called me at home one night when I come back from the pub, and I was a bit pissed, and I was really angry with him, and was angry with some of the other people who left. And in the course of that discussion, I more or less called him a cop on the phone.
Right.
And
What was his reaction to that?
he was taken aback, I think. I was having an argument with him. He was giving much the better of the argument with me on the phone. I just blurted it out to him, and that was the last time I ever saw him. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, fair play. So when you see him now, like, do you recognise the man?
Yeah, I do recognise. I recognise his voice, actually. I remember his voice. Yeah, he did, well, it's how long? It's more than 35 years ago or something. So, yeah, I can see it's him. Yeah.
So look, with his withdrawal, I mean, like a lot of the officers, they talk about this very complicated withdrawal that they did. That wasn't the case with him. He just sort of disappeared.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
I mean, and I guess that says something about Class War as well as an organisation. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like people were getting followed up and being checked out afterwards or before.
Well, you know, it's like Class War's nothing like the RCP, and you know, you take people as they are rather than having until you have a reason not to. Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine being part of one of those organisations where you are checking people like that. I mean, you'd go mad, right? I mean, like the levels of paranoia. I mean, I'm not saying that I shouldn't have been more paranoid myself over the, in the past when involved with groups, but
look where it took them ultimately. Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Any other thoughts on the evidence from this morning?
Yeah, funny enough, I can remember that fight with the Class War. There was reference to they'd had a physical confrontation. Actually, the RCP member who'd got the better of Class War members in a fight that he mentioned was a black guy, actually, quite a physically imposing guy. And it happened in Portobello Road, and Class War had been paper selling in Portobello Road, and they'd been paper selling in Portobello Road, and there was some words exchanged which come to blows. Yeah. So there was 3 or 4 Class War members got into a fight with about 10 of them and got knocked over, I think. Yeah.
And little do they know, 30 years later, it would be being discussed in a public inquiry.
Yeah, didn't it? The other thing is, he said some things at the end of there which I don't believe were true. If you remember, he was referring to officers going native or identifying with the groups in which they were embedded, which I think he wasn't being completely honest about that at the end, because his predecessor in Class War, I believe, had gone native. Right. Yeah. His name has not come up at this. He was known as Andy Bryant in Class War. Yeah. And
I can remember he nicked the petty cash when he fucked off, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. He was the treasurer of the group. Yeah. He joined from what was the Anarchist Federation at the time in the middle of the poll tax.
Anarchist Communist Federation?
Yeah, but it was the Anarchist Communist Federation. Anarchist Federation was a little bit later, but yeah.
I mean, I always thought that was. I remember there being talk at the time that there'd been this guy. People thought he was a cop, but I think they're just bitter because he nicked the petty cash when he skipped country. But that was the talk. I remember.
We didn't know that. There's a lot of confusion over this guy because his name has not come up at any of this. I believe Andy Bryant's name first was revealed at the Green Anarchist trial.
Yes, yeah.
Trial. It came up in the. I don't know how it came up, but his name come up, and now he seems to have completely disappeared for some reason. But
I mean, we're definitely getting. There's been a lot of people that we believe to have been somehow related to surveillance by the state who don't appear to have been Special Demonstration Squad officers. I mean, this inquiry theoretically is meant to be looking at all kinds of undercover political deployments. It has decided to focus on the Special Demonstration Squad of the National Public Order Intelligence Unit and nobody else, which means that I think there are plenty of agents of the state who have fallen through the cracks in that way.
Well, he was. This particular officer, Andy Bryant, how can I describe him? He's like, if you could imagine, you go all the way up to Newcastle for a Class War conference. It takes ages to start on a Saturday morning. Like, it's meant to start at 10. It doesn't start until 11. And like 10 past 11, he's the people muttering to others down the line, does anyone fancy a bevy, right? And then he'll disappear down the pub, right, with 3 or 4 other people, and then return at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon and complain about all the decisions that's made. But that particular guy, he liked to drink. This Neil Richardson wasn't like that, far more sober. But this guy was a pisshead. The other cop was a pisshead, and he's the person. I don't know if you've ever the Rob Evans book about undercover policing. You know, there's an account of class war in there. Well, at the time that book come out, myself and another person in class war, we did an interview with Rob Evans about that. Yeah, and but when the account come out in the book, they took all the information from Annie Machon. Right. That's Annie Machon's account of what happened. Yeah, right. And she refers to
the MI5 officer for people.
Refers to an officer who went for the debriefing with MI5 special branch officer. She said, who turned up with a can of special brew and was like surly and aggressive. Yeah, and she said he'd gone native. Yeah, I think that was Andy Bryant.
Yeah, that would make sense. It would fit certainly with it. Yeah. All right. We haven't. I mean, we've only been 15 minutes, but there's not long before for us to have our lunch and then get back in again. Anything else you want to say about this morning?
No. I'm sure I say lots of things about.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I think there's a lot of things that HN122 has said that I think are untrue. I think it's fairly clear that he was aware of sexual relationships taking place by the police officers, though he denies that. I don't believe him when he said that he put anybody who was sexist or racist on report.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but opportunity for himself personally, in terms of like the sexual opportunities, were somewhat limited in a group like a class war, considering it was like boys mainly. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any evidence to suggest that he himself involved himself. But given who else he was in the unit with at the same time, and given how they were carrying on, and given how open we've heard that they were discussing these things, the idea that he only heard of it when he hit the press recently just doesn't ring true on anything to me.
Very cagey, wasn't he, the whole time, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think there's, like the way he's been playing the yes-no game, he's trying to give away as little as possible. I wouldn't expect a huge amount to come out this afternoon. I think the most interesting things have come from slip-ups from things that he said to Operation Hearn some time ago, and then being put back to him, and him not being able to square that particular circle. But we'll see. Might be some interesting stuff slipping out. Thanks for joining us. Anything you want to add?
No.
All right, cheers. I'll be tweeting again throughout the hearings. We'll do another live video at the end of the day. I'll do a Twitter Spaces this evening, so if anybody who's followed proceedings wants to join chatting on that, please do. Cheers for now.